All right, I want to thank you all for joining us today for this presentation on the Working Group for Enhanced Emergency Response. I am Colleen Kiley. I'm the Coordination Program Manager with the Center for Geographic Information and Analysis. And it is my pleasure to present to you with Hope Morgan, my good friend, who until just last year I was working with over in emergency management. She is now the Geospatial Technical Excellence Lead for Compass within AECOM. And she's also the secretary for the North Carolina chapter of ASPRS. And she wants you to ask her what her group is doing later. So Hope, we will get started here in just a second. I wanted to point out to everyone that there is a chat available on the website, and please go ahead and log in there, log your questions for us during the presentation, and we will answer those at the very end. So I'll go ahead and get started today. All right. So I wanted to start off by explaining why this working group was put together. It started out underneath the Geographic Information Coordinating Council. And if you don't know, that's a body that was established by the General Assembly, and it's really there to provide direction, guidance, and standards for GIS data and projects within the state. It's a collaboratory body with the goal of sharing data, know-how, and improving the quality and access to spatial data. It has 6 subcommittees, and the Management and Operation Committee is one of those. And that's the committee that carries out the committee's business between meetings. And it's composed of all of the chairs of the other committees. So back in 2018, the GICC reviewed the Hurricane Florence response. And it became clear that we needed some additional work for a coordinated response within the Emergency Management Committee. And so the Management and Operation Committee initiated a working group, and the chair was named to be Hope. That was put badly, but the chair is Hope Morgan, who we have here today. And I'm actually going to now pass this over to Hope, and then she'll pass it back to me later.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Colleen. Yes, I'm the chair of the Working Group for Enhanced Emergency Response, and this was started after 2016 and 18 hurricanes, when people realized that there were a lot of people that were duplicating effort. So there was a ton of work that was going on between different state agencies, between different local government groups. And we wanted to make sure that we could consolidate and have the same answer. We wanted to make sure we were using the same sets of data to do our analysis and to understand what was happening. And there were several key stakeholders in state agencies that had data that were providing this, and they were providing it in all sorts of different ways. Some people didn't know it was available, some people did. So we put this group together, and we had our vision statement was really to collaborate in preparation for emergency events and avoid that duplication of analysis. Use geospatial data and technology to basically support emergency operations anywhere in the state, anywhere in state agencies, anywhere in local governments. And the last one was, if anybody did need GIS technical assistance, we would have a group of people that we could provide that back out to. So we had 2 main goals, and one was the data goal, to make sure that we had data and information available. And the second was actually the volunteer, which Colleen's going to talk about in just a moment. So goal number 1 is that centralized information. And when we started down this path, we really wanted to make sure that we were developing this data with the current technologies in hand, because we knew that we were going to have to give very specific people ownership of this information, yet still provide it out to the groups. And then we also wanted to clarify what the needs were. And I'll give some examples specifically a little later, but there are things that we use on a day-to-day basis that we didn't want to have duplicated in multiple spots. So we wanted to make sure that we were really looking at that information. So here we have an example of what we've come up with. And I want to actually give Brett Spivey a big plug here because he did a lot of work on building the Arcgis Hub and putting that together for us. So we do have the Arcgis Hub. And in that location, we have the capability for each person or group or agency or organization to actually consolidate how they're providing that information. So we just wanted to make sure that we were connecting all of the people, connecting that community in the right way. We wanted to give the provider a way to provide that information and keep it updated so we didn't have to keep downloading data over and over again, and so that we could make that information available. And that is a role, is a provider. And then we also have a viewer role, and the viewer role just can use the information that's in that system. So those two roles, if you decide to join and if you decide to become a part of this, those are one of the two things that you're going to have to tell us is what role you want to play in this. Tagging was also a very big part of this. And there is a document that was put together by CGIA when they were creating NC1 map. And we used the same tagging requirements that they did. So there is a document that is out there and available that you guys could actually grab and see how we're using that information. And then the last piece is for this is basically the best practices. We just want to make sure that we were taking into consideration all of the needs that were out there and all of the pieces and parts that were available for moving forward. Okay, so in this, the participant actually defines their data needs, which means that if you are an agency that has data that you need to secure, you can actually provide that information and provide it out in a way that if someone doesn't have access to that data, they would not be able to see it. So we're just making sure that we're providing that data in a way that is locked down where it needs to be, yet provided for the whole where it needs to be, and that you have ownership as the owner of that, as the provider of that data. You have the mechanism to control that information. So you can put it out there and then decide the next day it's not going to be available. And most of this is done through data updates as services. So we're looking at those services and what services are provided. So there is an expectation as a provider inside of this that you are going to build web services that will be provided for this information. But we also do have the capability to link to non-service data. So if there is data that is out there and located in specific places, you would actually have the ability to put that location in and people would be able to go to that location to get that information. Again, we're consolidating so we don't have information in multiple locations that is incorrect or that has to be updated or upkept. And we're keeping that key priority person who is in charge of that framework in the ownership role of that information. Next slide. All right, you want to just click through these and put them all up there. So these are some of the different data sets that are available, and all of these are services or data sets that are fed into the hub. So for NCEM actually has the inundation areas, DEQ has the lagoon status, AG has gas stations, data that's provided by counties, NCDOT, and then some of these organizations have larger sets of data. So for instance, NCDOT has Atlas, where some of this information is provided out of that group, and we're building them basically a card where you would have the ability to look at that card and get to all of the information. But that's the goal. Everybody owning their own data, not duplicating what work has been done, using the same set of information so that we're getting answers, and also being able to provide that to others who may or may not know it's out there, where it's at, or how to get to it. So we want to make sure that we're bringing in those local governments with the ability to access the data they need to respond correctly to incidents. One of the other things that we're doing is we're really focusing this on event-specific information. And we'll talk about next steps at the end of this, but what we're trying to do is say, okay, for a hurricane, this is the kind of data that I'm going to need. For flooding, if it's not in a hurricane event, but it's just flooding, there would be specific information. And this goes civic unrest, landslide, all of these have different requirements for what sorts of information is needed. Some of them are the same. You always need the population of who's there, where things are located, but some of the specialized information for these events, we want to store specifically with those events so that you don't have to fight with, do I need this? I'm not in a hurricane. Do I need this? I'm not dealing with civic unrest. So these are some of the goals for filtering. And then this is also event tailored, which means that if we have a hurricane, which is normally what we deal with in North Carolina, we would have data specific for that hurricane. And there could be sets of data that would be general to all, where we would have links or we would have web services that were available, but there could be specific information just for that event, such as inundation or such as information from NOAA about imagery. Those things would be event tailored for that event, and then we would pull those down when they were not available anymore. So again, this is really making sure that the providers have the control of the data, that we're doing it for event specific, that we have multiple sets of information out there for different types of events. So we're not duplicating effort, and so everybody can get to it. And that's really just our goal is, as a state, we want everybody on the same page.
So we want you to think of WGEER as a community. We have pre-event planning where we schedule meetings with all of the stakeholders pre-event. We discuss who will be producing data, how we're going to get it to everyone, and what data the stakeholders need for that event, because each event has its own little flavor. We have the hub. That is where we're actually feeding this data out to our community. And then we have the GIS people, who I will be discussing in just a second here, who we hope to be able to deploy out to aid our friends who are in need during these events. So the second goal of this was GIS assistance during events. And we wanted to develop a process for GIS staff in emergencies to go out and help local governments who maybe quite literally underwater. They need help. They are tired. They've been working for 2 weeks straight. They're overwhelmed. And something like this did exist already within emergency management, but it wasn't well understood. It wasn't well communicated to the local governments. And so the goal of this was to actually formalize that, get the word out, and make sure that we have volunteers in place for an event. So the first thing that we did was define roles and skills necessary. So these would be things like a GIS field technician, a GIS technician, a GIS manager, and what skills would you need to perform those? We set up these roles in a platform called Terms, which is already used by emergency management to deploy swiftwater rescue teams, search and rescue teams, fire response teams. So it's already well understood within the emergency management community, and it's already tested and works very well. So we used NAPSG, and I'll show you a slide in just a second here. So that's the National Alliance for Public Safety GIS Foundation. And they already had roles and skills set up as for samples. And we looked to those and determined that there might be some online training needed for some of these roles. So we'll post those. People can take the training, and then they can volunteer as and register as in Terms to volunteer during an event. And then at the end of this process, after events, we'll review whether we had the right roles, whether we had people with the right skills, and we may end up doing some revision for the next role, for the next event. So this is what the qualifications and criteria looked like for NAPSG. And you can see, it's kind of blurry here, but you can see that there's 3 training classes for a field data entry technician. These are things that you can take online, and they don't take that long. They're really just kind of basic classes on understanding how to respond to an event, how to keep yourself safe during an event. For a GIS supervisor, you may have a lot more training, and some of those may be necessary to do in person. However, we are not holding people to taking all of these classes. We want well-trained people, but we don't want people to feel like they can't help out just because maybe they haven't been able to take a class. So how would this volunteer activation work out? So the way it works is that a city will request aid from a county. And at that point, they may say, we're willing to, we need somebody for 3 days. We'll provide room and board. And so they will ask the county for that. The county has access to the Web EOC system. They will file a request to the state for assistance. The state will identify volunteers from the term system, and then they will deploy those volunteers out to the local community who needs it for the appropriate amount of time. So the status of WGEER, where are we now? We've told you about what our plans were, but where are we in the process now? So our hub is up and running. We're planning to beta test it for 2021. We had planned to do it for 2020, but luckily we did not have any hurricanes that required us to use this. So we're a little bit behind in that, but it's not because we didn't have it available last year. Our original members from the original work group joined in 2020, and now we're in the process, and that's one of the reasons why we're here today, of recruiting new members. And you can see a screenshot from what the one of the events looks like right here. So we're curating data at the moment for each of the events. So Hope mentioned that we had data, we had event types such as flooding, hurricane, wind events. We're curating the data within the original group for what kind of data people would need for those, what kind of apps they would need, and what kind of pre-canned maps they would like so that they can make their maps more quickly when they're asked to. And we've already set up constraints and support network for the group. So we have rules for data and content, which Hope mentioned earlier. We have help documents for data sharing, and we have a community team site for additional documentation and collaboration. And so when you request to join this WGEER community, you will also get access to that team site. So how do I join it? So if you have an ArcGIS online user account, you can send that name to Brett or I, and we will, through the hub, send you an invitation. You accept that invitation and you're in. Simple as that. If you need an online account because you don't have one already, you can either request an account from your local admin. That's the first step that you would try. If you don't have a local admin, request one from us. We will give it to you. And the rest of the process is really the same. We'll send you that the join request, you accept it, and you're in. So we have a phased plan right now. We had the testing, which was the original members in 2020. That was testing of the hub. Right now we're with the core team, we've recruited some new members. We have the original group, and we're planning a test, which I will let Hope talk about in just a second here, of the system coming up in the next month or two. And so the core team, we have federal, state, and local government members in that. So we did want to make sure that we were inclusive and we got all of the data that people would need within the state. And then expansion is the next step, and that's opening this up to additional emergency response organizations, not just federal, state, and local government entities. And that is something that we still need to discuss within the community who would be appropriate to also participate in this. And so with that, I'm going to actually send this back to Hope.
So I'm going to expand on that last line just a second. And that is, there are some sharing and security issues we have to cover with expansion to other groups. And I think we have to work out the details with not only those volunteer organizations or organizations that respond to events, for how we would share data, what could be shared, but also there are state and federal requirements for what data can be shared outside of state and federal agencies. So those are just some hurdles that we have to figure out how to jump. And I just want to let you know that that is coming, but if you are one of those groups that is not in a government agency and you are interested in being a part of this team, then we may be asking you for some help on determining how to jump those hurdles and how to figure out how to get this information shared in a way that we either have to have non-disclosures or things of that sort. Okay, so there's two sides of this. Of course, we have the goal number 1 and goal number 2. So for goal number 1, which is on the right, the data hub, we are going to do a tabletop exercise. And we have 2 events that we've looked at. We've looked at a hurricane event and we've looked at wildfire. And we are going to bring those teams in. And what a tabletop exercise is basically you talk through what would happen if there was an actual event. And you work through what data do you need at certain steps. So we do if it's 2 days from the storm, if it's the storm time, or if it's 2 days after the storm. What information do you need at those different times? And then we work through access to the system, how people would use that information, and then if everything is out there that they need, and we kind of learn from that walkthrough. And then we want to validate the data that's in the hub. So we're just making sure that who's responsible for uploading information, who's responsible for the maintenance of that information, who are our points of contact. And that's something that we will do yearly just to ensure that we have the correct people. People change jobs all the time, as the 2 people on this screen have shown. So we want to make sure that we are talking to the right people for any of this information. For the volunteer side, we're actually looking at NCEM to help with the clarification of the activation process. So we do know that people have to log into terms. You could actually log into terms on your own currently if you're an agency representative, but you also need to be classed into groups. So all the people that work for DOT would need to be classed into the DOT group so that we know that those people are there. We're also working through the Online ICS classes. This is the classes that you need for emergency response. These are the ones that fall in that category. And again, as Colleen said, we're not initially holding anybody to these requirements because we know that these classes can take some time, but this is a goal that we want everybody to work for to actually get all of these classes done. Then we're going to work with the communities to basically define assistance needs. And that is, if you are a one-man shop and you need somebody to come in, there's information we're going to need to know about your shop to be able to send somebody there. So when somebody walks in the door, you're going to have to be able to tell them things like how your systems are set up, what your passwords are to log in, if there's special roles and requirements, if there's data is set up in a specific way, what the server systems look like. These are things that you're going to have to be able to tell someone. So you're going to want to be able to put that all down in paper and keep it logged in a list that you can provide should you need assistance and bring somebody in the door. And then the opposite of that is true. So if you are walking in the door as a volunteer, there are certain requirements for what you're going to be able to need to do. And our classes and the rules for those roles and responsibilities are going to cover part of that. But the other part of that is going to be, do you have a good understanding of how systems are set up? Are you someone who is an entry level and is going to do some baseline analysis, or are you a database administrator that could come in and kind of sort out systems? So these are the different things that we're working for next steps. And as Colleen said, those tabletop exercises are going to happen in the next couple of months. And then we're going to have a full report that goes back to the GICC so that they can see kind of what's been done up to this point and get some feedback for specifically how we want to deal with those outside systems. So I would like to say, if you are a federal government agency, if you are a state agency, or if you are a local government or city official, and you would like to be part of this group, please let us know. And as Colleen said, you can get, you can send an email to her or to Brett Spivey. You can send one to me as well, but they're going to be the ones that can get stuff done faster than me. So they will be able to hook you up in this system, and we will bring you into the fold and let you be part of the working group for enhanced emergency response. And we hope you'll join us.
So our email addresses are down at the bottom there. So if you are interested in joining this community, you can email me or you can email Brett Spivey. Either one of us will get you in there. And if anyone has any questions, we are open for questions now. There's none in the chat so far. So let us know if you have anything that you'd like to know more. And it has been very fun working with Hope on this, the whole process. And it's actually been quite nice that we've been able to continue. Even though we've both moved on from our original roles in this, we've been able to keep it up in our new roles, because like I said, this is it is an open community that encompasses quite a few individuals in the state. Thank you, Michelle. Michelle said, great job.
Oh, thanks.
All right, so it is now 2:25. We want to make sure that we get you out on time here. So we have some special interest groups coming up right after this. So I encourage you to check your calendar and go ahead and go join one of those. I'm sure they will be lots of fun. But actually, Mike Herman has a question here. What types of volunteers are you seeking? What roles do they play? So we're actually seeking all kinds of volunteers. So if you are a field technician, if you are a GIS analyst, if you are a GIS tech, if you are a programmer, a GIS manager, any of those roles we are looking to recruit, because local communities may need any of those during an event, and each event is different. So there's different needs all throughout the state.
There's a couple of examples, and that is during the storms in 2018, there were just a couple of small towns that did not have, and counties that did not have enough staff to work 24 hours a day for 3 or 4 weeks. So all of those different roles were what we were looking for, to be able to bring in and assist them so that they could sleep.
So Andrew Stevens has asked, for anyone wanting to possibly get involved by submitting data, how do we go about it? So the first thing that you would do is you would join the WGEER group. So that'll get you access to the hub. You would, if you want to submit data, you would want to request to go in as a data provider, and we'll get you set up with that role, and you will be able to submit your data during an event. And Jeff Brown is on. Oh, Jeff.
Hi, Jeff.
Jeff says, excellent presentation. Thank you. All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us. And we hope to see you at the rest of the conference. And I hope to see you at the special interest groups coming up. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.